I first came to Baba in '82. I had heard of him while I was in Hawaii, and as soon as I heard, I wanted to go to meet him. Baba was very gracious and beautiful and yet unassuming, and I found myself as he was leaving feeling, "Are you leaving? Wilt thou leave me so unsatisfied?" You know, that feeling like I needed more. And immediately I hear him say, "When you know who you are, you will have some inkling of who I am." Initially, after enlightenment, I felt confident that enlightenment had taken place, but was finding myself having some doubts. One of the things was that I found that the I thought was still there. The I thought was still there, and I thought, well, once you're enlightened, that's supposed to vanish. And my whole objective in anything I do is to share how I came to my enlightenment in the service of everyone's enlightenment, because we need a critical mass of us. This was in the mid-'80s, and I was staying at a Sai Baba center in Southern California at the time. And this man broke in at 4 o'clock in the morning, happened to be on Shivaratri, and he tied me up, and then he raped me, and I was you know, crying out to Baba, "Baba, please come." See, what we come to learn from our hell experiences, which we draw to ourselves, as the Course in Miracles tells us, I am responsible for what happens to me. The secret to salvation is but that I am doing this to myself. Well, Baba says, "Do not think I am God and you are my devotee. Do not even think I am teacher and you are student," because both of those dynamics would speak of separation. But what he does say is, think only I am the ocean and you are the wave.
Yaani Drucker's view of the ocean from Seagrove, a small coastal community east of Destin, Florida. Yaani and Al Drucker have many connections to holy man Sri Sathya Sai Baba. She has made over 25 trips to Sai Baba in India since 1982. Baba led her through an inner journey, which she says has synthesized his teachings with those of the Course in Miracles and the Bible. All her experiences and interviews with Sai Baba support her conviction that he is the world teacher who has come to lead all humanity back to its divine source. Yaani has written a book, Not Guilty, Undoing the Illusion of Separate Existence, and has put together an online course designed to bring one expediently to one's enlightenment in the service of world peace. Her online address will be displayed at the end of this interview. Welcome to Soul Charts. This interview was recorded in Seagrove, Florida in March 2012.
I first came to Baba in '82. I had heard of him while I was in Hawaii, and as soon as I heard, I wanted to go to meet him. And a friend had warned me that going off to India, a young woman alone, was just not really going to be the wise thing to do. So because I had already accepted that Baba was God, I just sort of flippantly said, "Oh, okay, then he'll send me a group if that's what I need to get there." And I was working as a chief cook and bottle washer in a little health food place on Honolulu. And one day this couple comes into the health food store, and I find words tumbling out of my mouth. I say to them, "So are you going off to India to see Sai Baba?" And they just looked totally surprised. And they said, "We are. Are you the 9th person that Baba told us in meditation that we were going to meet?" And so...
Did you ask them what they meant by that?
No,
they
it was
actually had
just...
thought of 9 people, 9 of them going.
Well, they had 8 people. They were going to go to see Sai Baba, and there were 8 people in the group, and Baba had come to them, had told them in meditation that he was sending one more person.
Amazing. And I want to back up just a second before we go on. You said you heard about Sai Baba, and the next day you wanted to go to India, and you immediately fell for him. How does that happen so quickly? I'm always amazed when I hear people's accounts of that, because for me it was the long, slow.
Yeah, no, I heard and I was ready because I was looking so hard for God and for answers to all of these questions. What's life's true purpose? Why is there so much suffering in the world? Pardon me. Surely there's a way to live life purposefully and meaningfully in such that we leave the world a better place than the way we found it. And that's what I was looking for, thirsting for. And so the moment I heard of Baba, I just knew that he was going to give me some answers.
So here you are then, within a relatively short period of time, on an airplane heading for India.
Yes.
Pick it up from there.
Yes. And so we get to the ashram, and almost immediately Sai Baba spots me. No, I'm sorry. On the second day, the very first day, he gives darshan. He comes up, he walks around beautifully, takes letters, and of course I had, set myself up with high expectations in meeting Baba, and so in meeting God. I mean, whatever that would mean, but I knew it was going to be incredibly big and off the charts. But Baba was very gracious and beautiful and yet unassuming, and I found myself as he was leaving feeling, are you leaving? Wilt thou leave me so unsatisfied? That feeling like I needed more. And immediately I hear him say, when you know who you are, you will have some inkling of who I am.
So might that have been the very beginning of your search for your own identity?
That was really the beginning, exactly. And so that
was 89.
That was 82.
82.
So at that point I knew that was my assignment, was to come to know who I am.
This is kind of funny to ask because it's a little bit out of context, and I'd already discussed this with Al, who people say, who's Al, seeing this video? Al Drucker, of course, your husband. But for those people who are really still coming to Baba as newly aware of who he is, was, and forever will be, just a couple of brief stories about your one-on-one involvements with him over those early years from 82 forward. Experiences, chastisements, materializations, leelas.
Okay. Well, there's one lovely leela in which I frequently got the front row, and I was always embarrassed when I did, simply because I was a head taller than most people.
It wasn't because of the luck of the draw and the chit lines?
Yeah, it was the luck of the draw that I'd get the front row, but I was embarrassed by the fact that I kept getting that front line.
Oh, I was thrown out of the temple once because somebody said I was blocking everybody's view behind me.
Exactly, and I have bushy hair, on top of it. I mean, I tie it in a ponytail sometimes, but I always felt like people were not able to see. And so, but anyway, and sometimes I'd even find somebody in the back who was short and trade places with him. But once, as I was sitting in the front, Baba came by, and I had a handkerchief for him, and he took it and he wiped his hands with it and then threw it back at me, and I didn't like that because I wanted him to be more gracious. And so I took it home and decided that I'd wash it and bring it back the next day and have him do it properly. And the woman who was staying with me was just aghast that I should be so unsacred about something that Baba had touched. But sure enough, next day I get the front row again, and Baba looks at me mischievously, takes my handkerchief, very daintily wipes his hands, and then just ever so sweetly gives it back to me exactly the way I had asked him to.
That's amazing. Did you know then and there of his scope of omniscience?
I just thought it was what he ought to do. I mean, I knew that he knew everything right from the get.
But that he did it.
That was cool. I mean, now I think it's really, really marvelous. But back then I just, accept. And in darshan, I'd say to him things like, okay, now you're going to select that woman for interview. but you're going to walk past her first, and then you're going to turn back and signal her to go, and she's going to be in some distress. And it was like that kind of communication was taking place, and he'd sometimes look at me and wink, you know, that in fact, you know, we were communicating. And then indeed he'd turn back to her and wave her in. This happened to the pink ladies in Australia once.
Really?
I remember.
I was going to ask you about this then. From this moment forward then, was that enough? Did you have, one of his favorite terms for me and 1,000 other young men is doubting Thomas, because I've been born under the astrological sign of Libra. I'm a journalist, constantly putting both sides against each other to come up with a consensus. And it's a tough task for a guy like me to come quickly, like you did, like my wife Jody did, to Sai Baba's side. Was that all the evidence, proof, or suggestion you needed, or did you still
I
crave
wasn't
more?
looking for proof or evidence. I didn't come seeking confirmation that he was who he was. I knew who he was. How I knew it, I don't know, but I did, and I've never doubted it.
And this knowing is not a faith, it's not a belief, it's
No,
not a,
no.
It's not a hunch, it's a knowing.
Here. It's in the depths of my being.
Had you already been aware of that ability that you possess to have that knowing, maybe of Jesus, maybe of Course in Miracles, the veracity of it? Or was this something unique with Baba?
It was definitely unique with Baba. My Christian upbringing didn't take, I didn't find myself very impassioned with what was going on there. And the Course in Miracles only came much later for me. I came to Baba in the 80s and was introduced to the Course in the 90s.
Okay.
So,
One question that I mentioned to both of you before starting this was that I used to ask people, who is Sai Baba in their estimation, and it almost feels like I should ask who was Sai Baba, but I'm going to stay with the is, present tense. Who is he?
well, Baba says, do not think I am God and you are my devotee. Do not even think I am teacher and you are student, because both of those dynamics would speak of separation. But what he does say is, think only I am the ocean and you are the wave.
Well, you're living proof of your understanding as we sit here on the 17th floor of your great flat overlooking the Gulf of Mexico.
Dream that you had. It's a bit,
Yeah, what's that dream?
Oh, in my dream, Baba and I are playing hide and seek, and he's very good at finding me. I mean, I think I've got the best spot, and he's just right on it, and he's finding me immediately, and he laughs. And then I, go to find him, and very challenging, and he makes little noises and gives me little hints, but anyway, we are having a ball, just playing. And then he comes up to me, and he's very close, and he says, and will you play with me like this when I'm Prema Sai? And I sort of am startled, and I say, oh no, Baba, I'm going to be Prema Sai with you.
So you already proved to him your oneness with him.
I woke
In the
up
dream.
thinking, wow, that was wild. But that wasn't the end of the dream. He seemed pleased, but he warned me that won't be easy.
And has it been?
Oh no! Since that time, my whole world fell apart, and only really in the last year or so has it finally felt like, the roller coaster is over.
Let me ask you a really off-the-wall question, and only because I think we all tend to go through these roller coaster rides into the dark night of the soul experience, sometimes over and over until we get it through our thick heads.
Yeah.
I've come to understand that the only one word that really seems suitable for undergoing experiences like that is thank you. Thank you, God. Thank you, Baba. In that they are so instructive in our lives, you can't ignore their call. You may not see their message right away, but you certainly hear their call to arms, so to speak.
Right. Well, certainly,
does that happen to you?
Certainly, what I did with it was that I turned to Baba as I never would have before. Without those experiences. I mean, I fell on my knees to ask Baba for help and turn to him in every way, at every angle, because I had nothing. I had no other choice.
And his response was?
Well, I mean, frequently he'd give me assurances, but he didn't take me out of. I mean, it seemed like I'd be crying out, you know, do we have to expand the envelope any further? And he'd go just a bit further.
Did his assurances sort of mitigate the pain of going through those experiences? Just,
right,
knowing that he
right,
had
right,
your number.
right,
I
right.
see where you are.
Right,
Okay.
right. There was one time where I was just mad as hell, and I was just giving him the business and telling him that I had no friends, and on, you know. and he somehow pops in through my rant with, "I'm your friend." And so conversation stopper, you know, things like that.
Before we move on to, from what I read online, the supportive interest that helps you with your work today that comes from the Bible and A Course in Miracles, is there anything you want to still touch upon with Sai Baba, because he's so powerfully instrumental in shaping your life, from what I gather?
Well, I've written a book, and it utilizes the teachings of Sai Baba and the Course in Miracles and the Bible, and I think all three of them have been profoundly instrumental in my understandings and my, you know, awareness of who we are and what life's purpose is. And
this is such an important subject for me. I don't know how it is among all, let's say, Sai Baba devotees. I find them coming in every flavor under the rainbow of having specialized interest in what Baba's means mostly to them. To me, it's about awakening. And before Jody and I came down to Destin, I went online. We'd never heard of this place before. We came down because of the color of the water out here, the most aquamarine water in Florida and the Gulf of Mexico.
Emerald.
I went online and found Course in Miracles classes. I'm in 3 of them within a half an hour's drive from here every week. I looked online for meditation. I found right across the street from where you are, a gifted meditation facilitator. I looked for Guru. I found Swami Jay in Fort Walton Beach. I looked for ashram. I found his non-dualism ashram teaching the teachings of Swami Rama. I thought, who would have ever guessed that if you're looking for something to further your walk and figuring out who in the heck you really are, you might just find them if you put the questions out there. When did you start really putting the questions out there in earnest with the Course in Miracles? Was it because of what Baba had been telling you about, giving you hints about?
Well, let me tell you my story of the Course in Miracles. We were really dabbling in the Course, both of us, in the early 90s, and first going to workshops and to Ken Wapnick in Roscoe, New York, and but skimming it. I mean, not diving in and taking it seriously. And in '99, I decided that I really wanted to see if the Course in Miracles was something that was right for me. And so I decided to read it from cover to cover. So I took it to Baba's ashram in March of '99, and indeed read the whole thing from cover to cover, and found myself just as unenlightened about what the purpose of the Course was after as before I'd read it. I mean, it was just like it went over my head. It was too iambic pentameter and
its language structure is a little complex.
And deep and complex, and you know, why can't you make it simpler, Jesus?
I once blurted out in a class in total frustration, all this book needs is a good rewrite man.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what my book is attempting to do.
So you overcame your...
So anyway, at the end of that read, it was my 2-month stay at the ashram was up, and Baba appears to me in a dream, and I say, Baba, I'm studying the Course in Miracles, like I'm so proud of myself, you know. And he says, yes, I know, very, very happy. But you haven't understood it in your gut. And he points to his tummy. And he says, don't worry, I'm sending you a teacher. And that's when the teacher of the Course in Miracles, who was going to be the irritant that would drive me to dive into the Course.
I think I'm a step ahead of you. Go ahead.
would cause me to dive into the Course as though my, just drinking it up. And I found the beauty of the Course in Miracles because of this teacher that turned out to be the irritant that was the perfect teacher for my getting the Course in the essence of my being.
You want to share with the world who that teacher is that came and irritated the heck out of you? You don't have to.
His name is Charles Anderson. He's Anderson. He was in Wisconsin Dells, and that's what brought us to the Dells.
Yeah.
And he has subsequently left his body, so he
Quite
left.
controversial, quite powerful,
Yep,
quite
yep.
transformative for a lot of people, obviously for you.
Yeah,
Quite
yeah.
scandalous in the minds of other people, subject of...
Perhaps. I mean, I found myself not so much wanting to be in his presence. We spent the summer there, and then Al continued on at the academy where he was teaching. But I found myself bringing the Course in Miracles book back to Baba's ashram and reading it, in fact, 3 more times.
2 points, and I'll phrase them as questions. The place you're referring to is Endeavor Academy, and it's, I don't think it's that well known, really. But when I first learned about it, this is without knowing much about it at all, it seemed to me to be sort of a Camp Lejeune of Course in Miracles organizations where people went there and really got the pounded out of them as a means of helping them to understand what's left is who they really are. Tell me how close to the truth this might be or not. I certainly didn't experience it, but I read enough about it to get that feel from it.
Well, forgive me, Camp Lejeune means
Marine boot camp.
okay, that's what I thought.
A Marine boot camp for spiritual seekers.
Right. Yes, I think it's like that. But it wasn't that about it that was difficult for me. What was difficult for me was that at Baba's ashram, there's such a sacredness and a purity and a holiness that's supported, and the feet were completely knocked from under that.
Well, I consider myself as one of the most fortunate 2-legged animals in the world today because for many years now I've had the sources, the dualistic source of my learning to be Sai Baba and of Course in Miracles. The Course simply affirms in me what Baba has taught me these many years, and long before I really became a follower of Baba when I was studying the Course. In fact, on 2 occasions, Jody and I were called in, and once we took in a couple of Course in Miracles teachers, a German-American friend of ours, an engineer, tough as nails, really bright, really good with the Course, as a facilitator, a student, and a teacher. And I asked Baba right to his face. It kind of stunned everybody. I'm not quite sure where it came from. Baba, of Course in Miracles is a big book in my life. It's helping me to understand your teaching so much. Are you the author of the Course in Miracles? And he says, yes, I am. He said that twice on 2 different occasions. Yeah. And then people, when I mention this in some of these videos, it gets seen around the world, want to know what the Course in Miracles is. And one of the problems with it, from what I understand, and maybe you know something about this, is that as it's translated out of its native language of English, a lot of the concepts which were admittedly difficult to understand in English become even more obscure if it's translated into German, if it's translated into some other language. But how did this enter your life? I don't mean the literal story again, but do you see how it kind of dovetails with what Baba's message has been?
Absolutely, because again, what attracted me to Baba was seeking the answers to these questions about life, what life's purpose was, who I am, so many questions. And Sai Baba, just being with Baba, the answers were coming, but the Course in Miracles really solidified made it, just rounded it out. One of the things that Baba says is, I have come to make you completely ego-free. Well, reading the Course in Miracles those many times, each time I came to understand more and more clearly what ego is. And the last thing that ego wants is for us to understand what it is. ego stands on the tiny platform. Whatever you do, don't look at me. And so that's the whole game, is daring to look at ego and daring to understand, you know, how this world has been, how we have been seduced into believing ego's lies and distortions and things that we have fallen for, and distractions that have kept us from seeing truly who we are and what life's purpose is. And so I'm very, very grateful to the Course, because helping me to see ego clearly helped in relinquishing it, as the Course tells us to do, as Sai Baba tells us is life's objective. And so after that fourth read of the Course, I closed it and felt, now my mind has merged with the mind of Jesus, and opening this book is no longer feels right. It just feels like words, like it had gone so much deeper, and the words were now getting in the way.
It seems to me that the bottom line for this, for Yaani, might have something to do with helping you to find out more clearly who you really are, as Baba was perhaps the first to tell you.
All that stands in the way of knowing who we are is ego. Because, see, we invited ego into our minds to be who we are not.
Right, and ego for me then is all my attachments, including the negative attachments of thinking I'm not worthy, of thinking I'm a sinner,
Right.
of thinking I'm
All of
steeped
that,
in
all
shame
of those
and guilt.
false identities.
Those are equally, if not harder, to shoo away than some of my vices, let's say, or other more pleasant attachments.
Now, tell me I know you may have some resistance with this, but...
Well, where I wanted to go to here was my experience at the ashram
Okay.
about a month later. In fact, just a week later, there was an experience with Charles Anderson in a morning. I had just woken up, and it was about 4 o'clock in the morning, and found myself with this man for whom I had, at this time, had little regard.
You were in America or in India?
No, I was in India. I was at Baba's ashram. I had
So you were in the dream thinking he is with you?
It wasn't it was a kind of a reverie.
Okay.
He was with me in that experience, and we were dancing around the room at the academy, and our minds merged in an exquisite experience of what the Course refers to as the joining of minds. And I found in that a complete honoring of Al as my husband, and an incredible purity and an equality, no teacher-student dynamic. And in that moment there was, I found my body.
You're being, the military has upper hand here. These Air Force jets. Okay, continue.
I found my body just collapsed to the floor. It couldn't contain the Shakti and the power of that experience, of the joining of two minds as one. So beautiful, so profound. And when I came out of it, I kind of looked at Baba's picture like, what are you giving me this beautiful experience with this person for whom I have so little regard. And he was just assuring me that we are all divine. And then about a week after that, I was sitting in darshan and just found all of the pieces to the puzzle of the human condition just coalescing for me, and each piece fit perfectly in my life, and just so everything, suddenly it seemed as though in an instant I knew everything.
It was
and I knew that I knew.
Of enlightenment? Of realization, perhaps?
It was a moment. It turns out it was a moment of enlightenment. That was the moment of enlightenment. The threshold was crossed. Ego was let go of. I saw the underbelly of the ego thought system and emerged free.
What a joyful place to be. How could you
It
ever
was
let that slip through your
beautiful.
fingers?
It didn't slip through my fingers. It's always here. Once that has been experienced, it never goes away.
That's worth looking forward to.
And there was someone sitting next to me, and she whispers in my ear. She happened to be able to see auras. So interesting that Baba had her right next to me. She whispers in my ear, Yaani, whatever it is, your aura has just exploded to infinity. You know, Baba says man expanded to infinity.
She saw the manifestation
God.
of your experience.
She saw that. She didn't know what it was because she hadn't witnessed that before. And she says, your aura has just exploded to infinity, and you're sending off sparks of love and joy to all humanity.
So I've asked you who Sai Baba is. Who's Yaani?
Well, this is all by the grace of Baba. So this is who Sai Baba is. This is Baba's purpose, is to show us who we are.
Yaani, tell, it's a suggestion. I know you don't like to do it.
Please.
But tell your rape story. It is so key to this whole...
Al Drucker speaking without a microphone, just so I could identify who you are. He wants you to tell your rape, R-A-P-E, rape story. Okay, we're all ears. Now he's sort of forced you to consider whether or not you really want to tell it, but I think something could
Well,
be...
it does have to do with knowing who we are. We've got another plane.
Okay.
I mean, I was, this was in the mid-'80s, and I was staying at a Sai Baba center in Southern California at the time, and this man broke in at 4 o'clock in the morning, happened to be on Shivaratri, and he tied me up, and then he raped me, and I was you know, crying out to Baba, Baba, please come, and it didn't seem that Baba came, although there was a calm and a strength in that moment, and I found myself, as the man was leaving, saying to him, God bless you, and he...
Mentally or verbally?
No, verbally, and he kind of angrily said, God hates me. He just hissed it very venomously and left. And then I woke up some other people who were at the Sai Baba Center, and they, you know, took me to the police station, and we pressed charges, and he did go to jail, and from his jail cell he got a message to me, please ask Yaani to pray for me.
May I ask you a question about this? Because I want to hear the rest of this too, but it's a very touchy question that I have learned not to ask anybody who goes through hell of this nature without knowing what type of a spiritual foundation they have. Would this ever be an example where you could offer gratitude because of the fruits of the actions that you endured? It sounds like you were led into
See, what we come to learn from our hell experiences, which we draw to ourselves, as the Course in Miracles tells us, I am responsible for what happens to me. The secret to salvation is but that I am doing this to myself.
And after such a horrific experience, you can still
But we're
think
getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here. So so I was able to forgive this man and to want him to be blessed, because I found myself truly feeling sorry for him, that he had to hurt his sister like this, because we are, after all children of God, each of us as much as any of the rest of us. And so that he must be so hurting to have to deal in this way with his sister. And so I was surprised to feel that. But I did find myself really feeling angry toward Baba and disappointed.
for allowing this to happen?
Disappointed that though I had called out to him, he hadn't come to me and averted this.
Yeah.
And as I was praying to him, Baba, why didn't you come? Where were you? And I heard him to say gently, softly, what happened to you? And I just kind of, you know, this, and this, and I called out to you again angrily, and again gently, what happened to you? And the light bulb went on. Who I am was unaffected. The truth of me is invulnerable. I had read that in the Bhagavad Gita. You cannot be blown away by the wind. You cannot be burned by fire. You cannot be drowned by water. You are the immortal Atma. You know, you are untouchable. And suddenly I realized that that is the truth of who I am, and that experience was not valuable, but was value neutral. It did not hurt me. You see, Jesus refers.
Why do you say it wasn't
Jesus
valuable?
refers to the crucifixion as the last useless journey. Once we find out not that something has a value for us, but that it is absolutely valueless, we do not draw valueless experiences to ourselves to learn what we already know in the depths of our being.
That sort of seems to be the intersection of realization when you come to that understanding.
But that was only in '85, so I still had plenty of experiences to undergo, like the relinquishment of guilt and worthiness. Baba gave me many beautiful experiences to prepare me for that moment of realization.
And might this be the heart of your work today? The work that you do with groups and with women? And
My whole objective in anything I do is to share how I came to my enlightenment in the service of everyone's enlightenment, because we need a critical mass of us reaching our enlightenment in the service of ushering in the golden age for the planet.
I'm not sure where this question's coming from, but sometimes I throw terms around that might be easily misunderstood, and I don't mean them to, but I sometimes feel I'm living a schizophrenic life where I'm walking this zigzag line on one side of which is my small r self, and on the right side I know to exist the real Ted, or nameless entity of who I think I really am. And I get glimpses, but sometimes they're so minute that they hardly register on the Richter scale. But there's this dance going back and forth before who I am and where I feel the pain of whatever insults and assaults there are around this form. But every once in a while I come over and sort of kiss up against that line, and they don't seem to bother me anymore because I'm in a different place where nothing bothers me. I would call that equanimity. How does a person who's not where you are, how do your students, those who come and hear you explain your lessons from your own first-hand experiences, find that helpful to make them make some progress in transcending that schizophrenic state that I referred to?
Well, while I share in depth my journey, which I refer to as a journey without distance, because we all come full circle to where we never left, so we're not evolving. Baba says being is lost in becoming. So what we want to do is understand that we can stand on the shoulders of anyone who has gone before, and we all do. And also, like the Course in Miracles says so beautifully, while it has taken much time to be who we are not, it takes no time to be who we are. So all of this can be seen in an instant and let go.
Change of a thought.
Just a change, just a shift in consciousness. It reminds me, just that shift in consciousness idea reminds me of a dream I had with Arjuna. So Arjuna, 5,000 years ago, Krishna, brother.
Battle.
It's the day before the battle. Arjuna is describing to me, Yaani, the day before the battle, I saw in the minutest detail everything that was going to take place. And I threw up my hands and said, oh, Arjuna, does that mean we have no free will, that all of this is already predetermined? And he says, no, it's not like that. When consciousness changes, destiny also changes. So we shift our consciousness.
So
and our
destiny is
destiny
part of the
changes.
illusion, and it changes as you become more aware in your consciousness.
Yes, and we have a choice. We have a choice over. like the Course in Miracles says, time is only for making that, making that choice. That choice is available right now. It's not like it's at some predetermined time and that's the moment. Baba wants us enlightened yesterday, if not sooner.
Well, you're still a pretty young woman, and you're on a
Thank
flight
you.
path that's quite an adventure. It has been self-revelatory of a huge magnitude so far. What do you look forward to as this adventure called Yaani goes on?
Well, Baba says those saints and sages in temples and caves chanting the eternal Om are doing more for the world than all other worthy causes combined. And so I am here, Ted, only to be truly helpful, and that's my continual prayer, is Baba, I'll go anywhere and do anything or sit in my little cave. My only yearning and longing is that all of my brothers and sisters the world over see the beauty and the truth of who they are, who we all are in relation to each other, and who we are in relation to God.
That last part gave me goosebumps because I'm reminded of a story that perhaps you've heard of regarding the Pink Twins, whom you know of from Australia, when they were in the interview room and Baba left them to come out and walk among the gents in the mandir. Are you familiar with this story? And he looks at all the gentlemen out there, the professors and the doctors and the surgeons, and he says, see those two women back in my interview room? They serve more than all of you combined. They serve with the mind.
Yes, it's with the mind.
Yeah.
Because our mind is all the power in the universe.
And that's what you're talking about.
Yes.
The stage of life you've arrived to.
Right, it's not, yes, at some point you realize it's not about dealing with the problem on the level of symptoms, because that's what the doing would be about. But it's about meeting the problem at the level of cause, and the cause is ego, and the solution is the removal of ego. And that comes in just seeing ego for what it is. Once we see ego's valuelessness, we no longer have any use for it. But ego wants us to see it as our friend, our identity, and so it's constantly trying to bamboozle us and fool us into thinking that it's invaluable.
Maybe an unfair question. Who is your greater teacher in teaching you about how to rid yourself of ego? This fellow you came to have really strong mixed feelings about, or Sai Baba?
Well, that's a question that I'm not sure I need to answer. I mean, certainly Baba is my Mahaguru. But this teacher that you're referring to did help me to see ego. I did see ego in a way that I probably wouldn't have without his help. For initially after enlightenment, I felt confident that enlightenment had taken place, but was finding myself having some doubts. One of the things was that I found that the I thought was still there. The I thought was still there, and I thought, well, once you're enlightened, that's supposed to vanish. And then another thing was that I wasn't happy all the time. I mean, I was really having a rough go. In fact, it seemed like, just looking at it, like so many things were being thrown at me. It felt to me like ego was completely threatened by the fact that I knew what ego was, and it had to take me out. And so I was really finding it hard to survive in this world. And so I wasn't certain that it was in fact enlightenment. And about a year went by, and my mother was suffering from breast cancer, and I was spending some time with her and driving from Wisconsin to Washington State, and stopped to visit a friend, spiritual teacher / friend in Montana. And she knew I was coming, but the moment I met her at the door, she didn't even say hello. She immediately says to me, Yaani, you have to go to the Himalayas. And I said, "Hi, Deborah. Nice to see you, too."
She needed to get that message to you right away.
Yes, it was just, and I said, "Let me go to the, use the washroom, wash my hands, and we'll talk about it, what's going on here." And she says, "Well, you need to go for two reasons. The first one is to anchor in your enlightenment." I hadn't told anybody I thought I was enlightened.
She already
except
knew
Al.
somehow.
Somehow she knew. And the second one is for marriage to Shiva.
Okay, explain that briefly.
So, well, I mean, as soon as I heard that part of it, I thought she was loopy. And I thought, she's doing her Deborah thing. And so I ignored it. And I was on my way back to Wisconsin. And Al was spending time at Endeavor Academy. And we were together for about a week. And we were both realizing that it wasn't working. And so finally Al made the, the obvious. And he said, "This isn't working, Yaani. Where do you think you could go?"
How about as far away from here as I could humanly get?
We still had a home in Crestone.
Never heard this part.
We still had a home in Crestone, Colorado, so I said I could go there and spend the summer there. It'll be quiet and lovely, and I can work on my book. And he says, no, not there, some other place. And it just popped into my mind, I suppose I could go to the Himalayas. And he said, "That's it." And he immediately goes online and gets the tickets for me and works out, I'm getting a red carpet ride to the Himalayas, but kicking and screaming the whole way because I really am not looking forward to. It's like, check it off. I did that on my first trip to India. I trekked through the Himalayas, had a wonderful time, but backpack on, dirty.
And this is going back on your own by yourself, right?
Right, and so I'm going to be all by myself, and it just, something about it wasn't exciting for me. But so looking at Deborah's clues, I thought that I needed to go for Shiva energy. And so the first place I went to was Gangotri, where the Ganges River starts.
As its source?
At its source. So I spent a couple of weeks there, had some beautiful experiences, and then felt that that was complete, and then went to Kedarnath. And on my way to Kedarnath, somebody told me about this place that was just 5 kilometers from where I was going that I must see, where Shiva and Parvati had gotten married.
So you were guided to that spot, weren't you?
So I was still having my doubts and saying, "Baba, are you really with me as I'm doing this 5 kilometer trek? If you're with me, please serve me lunch."
Not just give me a little sign, but serve me lunch.
Right. And so I get to this little hamlet. I mean, there's nobody around. There's no tourists. And I, find out that there's this little pandal. There's just this little square. And I'm told that this is the place where Shiva and Parvati were married. I'm thinking, okay, great. Oh, but there's also this temple and a fire pit that you can walk around, that people walk around 7 times when they come here to get married. So I thought, okay, marriage to Shiva. All right, I'll do this, being clueless. So I asked the pujari to please light the fire. And he says, "Madam, that'll be 35 rupees. I said, "No problem." And so he starts the fire, and then he says, "Madam, where's husband?" And I say, "It's okay. It's just, something I need to do." And so with Shiva before me, beside me, I
walk around,
do the fire pit 7 times. And then can't think of anything more that I should be doing there. And so I put on my shoes and get ready to leave. And there is this young sadhu who has been watching me. And he says, "Sister, please come here and give me your darshan." And I say, "Nice to meet you." And he shortly, and I ask him what his purpose is. And he says, "Oh, I'm just here to have a vision of Parvati."
Wow.
And I thought that was lovely, a lovely reason to be there. And then he says to me, "Have you had lunch? Will you please join? Will you please join me for lunch?"
Is this a monk?
He's a sannyasi.
Mhm. He's on his way.
He's got the ochre robe
Yeah.
on, and he's
And
very
he
young.
provided lunch for you.
And he provided
Baba's free lunch.
He just bustled around and fixed all these yummy things, chapatis and
You must have burst out laughing.
sabji, and well, I was just elated. But then, so he's fixing me lunch, and I'm stuffed to the gills. You know how these Indian mamas are; they just keep feeding you. Well, he did like that. And then he's gone for some time, and I'm thinking, okay, am I just supposed to get up and leave? And then finally he comes with this big platter, and it's got all of these fragrances and kumkum and wonderful things, and he starts doing these mantras, and he's putting these things on my third eye and on my feet.
Is he locking in your enlightenment?
I don't know what he's doing, but I'm just sitting there and praying to Baba and saying, "Thank you." And then as I go down the hill, when it's finally over, and I'm just floating down the hill, and I say, "Baba, I only asked you for lunch, and you gave me everything."
What a beautiful story.
He gave me that you are a goddess. Yes, you are a
What
goddess.
a beautiful story.
Okay, it's not quite over.
I love it so far.
And so then then after I went to the temple in Kedarnath, I went to Badrinath, and I had met this young man who had an idea that he had attained his enlightenment at Kedarnath. And so I was walking along with him in going to the Baba temple in Badrinath, and then we went to this cave where this guru was sitting with his devotees. And the moment we walk in, it's very dark, but it just is full of light, and it's like very powerful. And I sit down, and I find my body is so light that I have to sit on my hands. And we're probably there like that for about a half hour. And then my companion says to me, "Yaani, the guru is giving you some prasad." So he's getting ready for us to move on. And so I open my eyes and receive the prasad. And then we get outside of the cave, and my companion says to me, "Boy, that was he says, "You've just been blessed by the gods." And I say, "Boy, that was a powerful experience." And he says, "I'm not talking about the experience. I'm talking about what's in your hand." And I opened my hand, and there was a Rudraksha bead. And he says, "Yaani, when I was in Kedarnath, I had prayed to the gods to confirm my enlightenment by giving me a Rudraksha bead. So your enlightenment has been confirmed.
Mission accomplished.
Now you need to go to your guru and place your head at his feet for the blessing that has been given."
The guru there or Baba?
The guru is Baba.
Baba.
And before I went to the Himalayas, I had asked Baba inside, "Baba, shall I plan to see you as well?" And he said, no, just see me in the Himalayas.
That's great. It's been a great story. Yaani, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Ted.
God bless you and Sai Ram.
Sai Ram to you, and Sai Ram, brothers and sisters.